Hope all of you have had a good week so far. I have. Went to the doctor Monday, a couple of shots and some medication. I feel like I'm doing better, though still sound probably somewhat clogged. Lee's not had that great a week, and that explains her absence. A couple of things that I did not know Sunday, even Sunday night, and I wanted to tell you about. Some of you may have already heard, but Brother Leo Plyler was taken to Brookwood Sunday afternoon about 3:30 or so. And did y'all hear about that? And he was not admitted until on into Monday morning. Very confused. His calcium is all over the place. And I've stayed with him about an hour and a half or so today, and he's kind of in and out. And Jalea said he was a whole lot better today than he was yesterday and Monday. So I know they are kind of unsure how things are going to go along those lines, but he did not need to be by himself even in the hospital room. So, but he was getting better. Another thing that I did not know until yesterday, Carol Taylor, who has visited with us called me from Brookwood Hospital also. She was in the same hospital as Leo, and she was having surgery today. And she had last Thursday at the Homewood Library, she had just passed out. She was in a lot of abdominal pain. Anyway, she has a couple of masses in her abdomen area, and that they operated on her today, and from what I've understood, everything was successful. So, but anyway, she's not in good shape. She's had COVID, and she really hadn't gotten over it. But anyway, those two I know about that I wanted to share that information with you. Glad to see Brother Farron back, though he's not had a good day today. Same troubles as Lee has. In our readings, we've skipped 2 weeks. 2 sessions, and we are in 2 Kings. From Sunday to today, we would have 2 Kings 9 through 2 Kings 19. Let's just go through fairly quickly because we have a lot to do with our life of Christ. First Kings 11 ends with the death of Solomon, and 1 Kings 12 begins what we call the what? Divided kingdom. And it continues on through a lot of what we're studying here. In 2 Kings, the 9th chapter, who's reigning in this chapter? Okay, Jehu. And Jehu ends up slaying Joram, Ahaziah, and then in chapter 10, what do we have? Jehu slays somebody's sons. That's right, Ahab's. And then a lot of the things that were done kind of, we might say, opportunistically, not necessarily because they served God and loved God so much, but for power. And he has a number of people who served idols killed and trapped and killed. They were worshiping who? Baal, which was right, but I think there was more of a power play. Hazael is after Israel a little later, and Athaliah comes onto the scene. And then in chapter 12, what happens? Joash becomes king. And then finally in 13, what do we have? Well, in the end of 12, who dies? Joash. And then 13? Jehoahaz. And Jehoash reigned over Israel. And then Elisha is sick. And then in chapter 14, what happens to Amaziah? He's what? The reign of Amaziah is mentioned in Judah and Jeroboam II in Israel. Amaziah, it happens to almost all of them. They get what? That's right. There's a conspiracy against him. He's killed. And Jeroboam the second is ruling in Israel. So something real quickly, Jeroboam the second reigns, that's to be contrasted to Jeroboam the first, who was the first king in the divided kingdom in the north. That's right. And so Jeroboam the second, one thing we want to remember is that during this time, Israel, the northern kingdom, expands considerably. And it looks like things geographically, politically, socially, and all that are going so well. But spiritually, they were bankrupt. And it's during about that time that Isaiah comes onto the scene as the prophet and speaks against them. And so while they're doing so well, the end was going to come in about 30 to 40 years. In chapter 15, the reign of Zechariah. And then in chapter 16, Jotham, and who else? Ahaz, right? What was that, Brother Gene? Good. Ahaz and Hezekiah's reign over Israel in 17. And in 17, we have the end of what? The northern kingdom. That's right. And then in chapter 18, Hezekiah's reign is detailed. And Hezekiah was a bad king, right? Bad man? No, he was good. He was good. And then in the, we've had the captivity described of Israel. And then one other, chapter 19, Hezekiah has a prophet come to him. Who is it? Isaiah, right, and the message from Sennacherib. All right, we'll try to get caught back up, and well, we are caught up. I didn't cover everything that we missed, and we'll try to do a little bit better job. Let's get our Life of Christ thinking caps on. I've told several of you, but I don't think not in this class, that if you're thinking about little booklets that would help your library on the life of Christ, I highly recommend at least two. The Fourfold Gospel that I quote from a lot by J.W. McGarvey is, I think, still a Cadillac in one volume on it. And then the second little book that really the Waldrons and a lot of people rely on heavily for the chronology is A.T. Robertson's A Harmony of the Gospels, A.T. Robertson. And it's he has a lot of footnotes that are worth the price of the book. I mean, he has a good, you can find this in other places, but for instance, the 3 days and 3 nights of Matthew 12:40, he goes into pretty good detail on explaining that. But he just had, there are a lot of good things about this book that A.T. Robertson's A Harmony, I recommend it pretty highly. Okay, now let's get our stuff out. And we had gone through the Waldron's introductory material the other day. And lo and behold, Lee and I were talking about this. I found just another proof reading mistake. If you look on page 5, where the Waldrons actually start their narrative, Gabriel announces the birth of John to whom? Yeah, how's it? Jonathan, you see a problem with that? Yeah, it's not Zacharias, it's Zacharias. There's just a misspelling there. And so I don't know. I hope they redo. Lee and I were talking how, both Sandra and Bob were so oriented to details. And this would, I hope Bob does not know that his work along with Sandra has been so shoddily put together. It bothers me for him. But anyway, it's still the substance, the text is great. But it has more eye appeal in this new format, but there are just some problems in it. Okay, if you would, you noticed we went over, even in my stuff, on page 5, the helpful hints for Bible study. That's kind of where we left off. And we had the basic outline of Jesus' life, the years of preparation. Always remember there are about 30. You've got from the time that things begin to be revealed early on until the time that he's baptized, which Luke 3, about verse 23, mentions he was about 30 years of age. And so the baptism of Jesus is the trigger for the beginning ministry, which carries him through the region of Jerusalem and Judea, and probably 3 to 6 months. If you'll glance down at the very bottom, I included a kind of a timeline. The book of John is the only record of the Lord's life that we can construct pretty much a timeline insofar as the 3.5 years of Jesus' ministry that most conservative scholars believe occurred. And you can see that on my timeline down here. But anyway, the years of preparation would have been about 30, and then he's baptized. Events happen there in John 1, John 2, he goes to Cana, and then he comes back to Jerusalem. And then we have the first Passover that's mentioned in John 2:13 when he cleanses the temple. And then time is skipped until John 5, if you'll notice down there. That's the second Passover. John 6, verse 4 is the third. And then in John, at the very end of the timeline, John 11:55 is the fourth. So putting all that together, it gives the life of Jesus the personal ministry, about 3.5 years. But anyway, the beginning ministry, then if you look back up at the outline, the Galilean ministry, probably the better part of 2 years, 18 months to 2 years. Then people are following him for the wrong reasons, and so he begins to withdraw himself, and there are about 4 of those withdrawals from the multitudes. And then the time is coming nigh, so we have the closing ministry. He comes down, crosses the Jordan River, goes through Jericho, and he's around Judea as well as Perea. Luke and John primarily record those the time there. And then the last week, and then he's crucified, buried, raised, and we have the appearances, the resurrection, then finally the exaltation. It's mentioned in Acts 1 and also in Revelation, part of what we read tonight. And also it's even mentioned in Daniel prophecy, how the one likened to the Son of Man ascended into the clouds and came into the Ancient of Days, and there was given to him kingdom and dominion and so on. All right, so let's turn our page, 6 and 7, and we have the mount on page 6. That one mount really can just about be all you need for the life of Christ. And so what we're going to do, guys, is we're going to look at it in a harmony, or in the best we can in a chronological way. Now, Matthew starts off with the genealogies of Jesus, beginning with Abraham and going forward. Mark with really the work of John the Baptist. John begins really at the beginning of time and looks backward. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and so on. It's Luke's account that begins as a history and really ties Jesus to the Old Testament prophecies that we just studied a few weeks ago from Malachi. And Lee had pointed that out, and she's exactly right, and that's what we have. So let's start with Luke and look at, if you'll notice on my page 7 here, I'm trusting you've read all of the Waldron material and your passages as well. But these years of preparation, Matthew 1 through 3, Mark 1, the first 8 verses, Luke 1 through the better part of 3, and then John 1 could not, it really doesn't have to be placed there, but I did it anyway, just because it needed to be placed somewhere, and I thought that was about as good as it could go. So let's look at the birth of John. What we have in Luke, stressing, remember, Matthew stresses the fact that Jesus is the tie to the Old Testament, the fulfillment of Old Testament expectation. The kingdom of heaven is emphasized. Mark emphasizes Jesus' authority, his miracles. Luke, his humanity. And John, what? His deity. All right, so Luke stresses the humanity of Jesus, and so we've got some details in Luke 1 about the announcement of the birth of whom? John the Baptist. And then the announcement about the birth of Jesus Christ. Then we have Mary and Elizabeth get together, and we have some songs that are kind of prophecies in the form of songs of both, as well as Zacharias. And then we have the birth of John, and then we have at the very end the summary of John's growth, verse 80. So Luke 1 is a long chapter. There's a lot in it. And but it goes back to the overall idea of detailing the human side of, in this case, John and Jesus. All right, let's start with our reading, 1 through 4 here. Greg, if you would, please. Luke 1, 1 through 4. And what we're seeing here is like a historical preface, unlike all the like the other three. We have a historical preface or introduction. Okay, Greg? Okay, so by the time Luke writes this, had others begun to write about Jesus? Yes, and many, in fact, he says, have drawn up a narrative concerning these matters. And all of these matters concern, it's interesting, the phrase here, which have been fulfilled among us. I think the King James says things which we certainly believe. They've been fulfilled. That's everything that was portrayed of Jesus has come to fruition, and people have been talking about that. And he says, as they delivered to us who from the beginning were eyewitnesses, a lot of people had seen what had gone on with Jesus from the beginning. But so he says in 3, it seemed good to me also, having traced the course of all things accurately. What did your translation have there, verse 3? Okay. Yeah, all things accurately or perfectly from the first. And so he's going to do that in order to write to the most excellent Theophilus. Most excellent Theophilus. This is in notes. This Waldron's, everybody knows this. Theophilus means lover of God, or a lover of God. And the question sometimes is, well, is this kind of a general statement to all people who love God, or is it to a specific individual by the name of Theophilus? Most conservative scholars think it probably is a specific individual. And another reason that textually that would suggest that is when he uses the description, most excellent Theophilus, singular. He's talking about a specific person. Hendrickson and some others make the point that that this is standard procedure for a type of a history or narrative that's given about someone and is actually given to one who might be interested in publishing it and putting it out. There's just nothing that I've ever read about Theophilus that we can know any more about, except his name means lover of God. And so he obviously was. And then it's the same thing Luke mentions in Acts, the 1st chapter. He writes when he says the former treatise, O Theophilus, that I get. So we see that Acts is kind of a second volume of Luke, and he's writing it basically to the same person, but it's obviously for everybody. That thou mightest know the certainty concerning the things wherein thou wast instructed. Do most of your translation use the word instructed there at the very end? Taught, yeah, taught. It's an interesting word. It's not the usual word like that we get didactic discourse or teaching. It comes from a Greek word that the Catholics use for catechism, catechizo, and it's like orally teaching things. You know how the Catholics will do this. It's just there's a lot of stuff done by rote. And this response back and forth. And that's kind of what this, so here there were oral transmissions of what Jesus had done by some who were eyewitnesses of him. And Luke says a lot of them have done that, but I've traced this thing out accurately. Now, I wanted to pause just for a moment and think with you about an idea about the people who were responsible, the men who were responsible for the writing of the New Testament. Let's see here, finally get it. Okay, there are usually understood eight men who wrote the New Testament. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Peter, Paul, who else? James, and Jude. Now, if you think about who the apostles were, Peter, Andrew, James, John, Philip, Bartholomew, Thomas, Matthew, James the son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon, and Judas, then we have Matthew and John and Peter and Paul. Those would be the apostles. And so that means that Mark and Luke and James and Jude were what we say prophets. They were inspired men. And then when we put the two together in passages like the Ephesian letter, chapter 2, verses 19 through 21, and chapters 3 through 5, 2, 19 through, seeing the church is built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Christ Jesus himself being the chief cornerstone. And then in chapter 3, how that by y'all can quote it with me, how that by revelation was made known unto you the mystery which I wrote before in few words, whereby when you read what I wrote, you can perceive my understanding of the mystery of Christ, which in other generations was not made known to the sons of men, as it hath now been revealed by his holy apostles and what? And prophets. So the revelation of God came by apostles and prophets. There were 4 apostles who wrote the New Testament, 4 prophets who wrote the New Testament. And what we're studying with Luke would not be an apostle, but would be a man obviously inspired of God. And he's writing these things by inspiration and as for the accuracy people would know. Anything, Greg, you want to say? Melanie? David? Okay. All right, we've got 2 or 3 questions, 3 questions. Luke gives his purpose for writing in these verses. Had others written about Jesus by the time he wrote his account? Yes, many. However, there was a need for a record of Jesus' life that was completely accurate, unlike some of the earlier uninspired accounts. To whom did Luke write? Theophilus, right. Luke's account was that Theophilus and others might know the what? The certainty of these matters. All right, good. All right, now let's keep going. In 5 through 25, we have Gabriel announcing the birth of John to Zacharias. So we're going to get a little word picture of who Zacharias and Elizabeth were. We'll know where they were, what he was doing, and we'll get some information about the nature of John's work. Melody, if you would, why don't we break this down, 5 through 7, and we'll just 5 through 7 right now. Okay, so here Zacharias goes back to the course of Abijah, high priest, and his wife. The priest had to, priests could marry outside the tribe of Levi, but they had to marry virgins. But she's on the same page. She is what? She's, yes, wife of the daughters of Aaron. And what kind of character sketch is stated in verse 6 of both of them? Righteous before God. And look at the the detail. Walking in all the commandments and ordinances of the Lord, blameless. That is, blameless under the law, as blameless as you could be under the law by walking. So their personal qualifications were impeccable, sterling character. And yet they had difficulty. They didn't have what? A child, and there were two reasons. One is Elizabeth was what? Barren, and they were both old. And reminds us of a lot of others. Abraham comes to mind immediately. All right, let's keep reading. David, if you would, 8 through, let's break this down, 8 through 17, please.
So it was that while he was serving as priest before God in the order of his division, according to the custom of the priesthood, his lot fell to burn incense when he went into the temple of the Lord. The whole multitude of the people was praying outside of the hour of incense. Then an angel of the Lord appeared to him standing on the right side of the altar of incense. And when Zacharias saw him, he was troubled. Fear fell upon him. But the angel said to him, "Do not be afraid, Zacharias, for your prayer is heard, and your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you shall call his name John. And you will have joy and gladness, and many will rejoice at his birth. But he will be great in the sight of the Lord, and shall drink neither wine nor strong drink. He will also be filled with the Holy Spirit, even from his mother's womb. And he will turn many of the children of Israel to the Lord their God. We will also go before him in the spirit and power of Elijah, to turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the disobedient to the wisdom of the just, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord."
All right, 2 or 3 things we want to call attention to. As he's going in executing the priest office in the order of his course, or the order of his division, there's some interesting reading about that, how the descendants in the Levitical tribe, the sons of Aaron, how they would, there were so many of them by this time that they would have maybe 1 or 2 days a year that they would serve. And you might only have one time a lifetime that you would actually go in and burn incense on the altar of incense, which was next to the Holy of Holies. That's like a one time in a lifetime, because there were so many who did it. And incense was used. They would take it in the morning around 9, and in the afternoon around 3. The usual time that people would gather and pray when the priest would be going about their sacrificial duties would be in the afternoon. And it was hence called the hour of incense, or the hour of prayer. And so when we come to Acts, the 3rd chapter, well, even in Acts 2, we're not drunk as ye suppose, seeing it is but the 3rd hour of the day, 9 o'clock in the morning. And then in Acts, the 3rd chapter, we have the hour of prayer. It would have been about the 9th hour, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So you have some details like that you can see what's going on. And this was a very big deal for Zacharias. Well, he did this by lot, it says in verse 9. The custom of the priest office, his lot was to enter into the temple of the Lord and burn incense. So it came his time to do that. And as he's doing that, what's happening outside? Verse 10. They're praying. Yeah, that reminds us, we'll see, of Anna in Luke 2. And so as he's going about his business, it's dark inside. They've got the lampstand. And all of a sudden, this angel appears to him, standing on the right side of the altar of incense. I don't know, if you're like I am, well, why the right side? What's significant about that? It could be the right side, that is, if you were standing at the veil, would be close to the lampstand. Maybe it could be seen easy. I've not read anything that says, and maybe it's not that important anyway. But when Zacharias saw him, what was his emotional feeling here? He was scared. Yeah, he's fearful. And so the angel said, "Don't fear." And it's obvious that he was a prayerful man, because the angel said, "You're what? Your prayer's heard. Your supplication is heard. And your wife Elizabeth shall bear you a son." And now we have the information relative to John. He would give joy and gladness to many, verse 14. Well, that would be to many who would know something about Malachi, true or false. Yeah, yeah. Or maybe Isaiah, the 40th chapter. You know, there'll be a voice of him who cries in the wilderness, make ready the way of the Lord, make his path straight. So the Jews who were thoughtful, who were knowledgeable of the law, all of these things would make sense. That, oh, it's coming. The Messiah is almost here. Here's his forerunner. But that would be to people who knew. What was that? No, that was about all. Yes, ma'am. Yes, good point. Yes, the famine that Amos had predicted of not of water or bread, but of hearing the word of the Lord. Yeah.
And then the other thing that I thought about, the temple that they're talking about is Herod's temple.
Right.
Okay, you've got all these high priests that are mixed up with Roman
Yes.
temples and all that. So are they having to share the temple? I mean, it's Herod's temple, it's not according to God's.
Well, it was Herod had refurbished it, you know, but it was still the Jewish temple.
He had a lot of things in there that shouldn't be in there, right? The women's court and Gentiles and things like that. Sadducees had a place in Herod's court.
Well, there had been those courts, you know, during the time of Solomon, and then of course it was destroyed, and then when it was rebuilt under Zerubbabel.
What I'm thinking is how they work together, because the priests of God definitely weren't going to be anything like these priests. Wasn't it nice?
Annas,
They're
Annas and Caiaphas, yeah.
not like them. And those aren't even of Aaron. I mean, they're set up by, I think they said Roman leaders or something. What I'm saying,
Yeah.
how do they work that out to be able to get along with each other when they're on different sides of it?
Well, you've got some, like what we were studying, you know, with John Hyrcanus and Aristobulus and those fellows who were basically not even of the right lineage, and appointed primarily as a political leader, kind of a combination politico-religio leader. But by the time we get here, at least, and of course, Zacharias is not a high priest; he's a priest, and at this point, I think Annas would have been the high priest. He's not mentioned until later on in the life of Christ, but Annas would have been. And then they deposed him because they thought that whereas the high priesthood was a lifetime appointment, that he might gain too much political power, and so he was deposed, and his son-in-law Caiaphas was put in his place. But that's later on. That's not right now.
They weren't right inside God.
No, but you had some who were, you know.
Talking about the righteousness of Elizabeth and
Zacharias.
in thinking that they're having to kind of cohabitate with these
Oh yeah.
that are trying to lead the Jews in a different direction and everything, they were righteous to be able to do that.
Yeah, and it reminds us of Ruth, you know. You've got all kinds of shenanigans going on around you, but you're trying to do right, and I think that's a good.
And then Caiaphas, wasn't he the son-in-law of,
Annas.
yeah, so he definitely wouldn't have been the right kind of priest, because son-in-law couldn't be.
Right. Yeah, they would have been the high priest. Yeah.
Still would be an error.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Be an error.
Yeah, right. That's right. That's right. But you do have spots of faithful people, you know, like you do here. Okay, so Zacharias is told by Gabriel that this man his name is actually called John, verse 13. That's what his name will be called. And he would bring joy and gladness. And then in 15, 16, and 17, you really have the tie back all the way. And as Sandra well pointed out, that the silence is broken. And as Lee pointed out a few weeks ago, that it's so fascinating that the very end of Malachi predicted that there was going to come Elijah the prophet, who would turn the hearts of the children to the fathers to the children. He would prepare the way of the Lord. And what happens in Luke 1, when the announcement of, he ties it all the way back right there to Malachi. And now this is what he's saying. He will be great in the sight of the Lord, would not drink wine nor strong drink. By the way, when you have a discussion on social drinking or drinking in particular, in essence, wine, the word wine is kind of a, you can't tell if it's fermented or unfermented just from the Greek word. It depends on the context. But when you have the other word, strong drink, that always is alcoholic in content. And so we would say wine could be just grape juice. And I think oftentimes it is. But a Nazarite, and I'm getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but a Nazarite was not to eat anything or drink anything off of the what? Of the vine itself. So grapes, fresh, not alcoholic, he would not. So you have no wine, just grape juice, nor strong drink, fermented. And all of that's ruled out in the case with John. And then in verse, he shall be filled with the Holy Spirit even from his mother's womb. And so don't ask me what all that means, because I just really don't know, except like the Waldrons make the point, it probably is a kind of a summary statement that he would have, there would be the working of the Holy Spirit in him. Yeah, Greg? Yes. And that's what makes it so spine-tingling, that it's like, okay, back in Amos, there's going to be a time where I'm not going to speak. Then we have Malachi, he closes with Elijah, the prophet is coming, and he'll turn the hearts of the people. And then here Gabriel announces, Elijah is going to be born to you. But it's going to be in the form of John. Yeah, good point. Did you have something else you wanted to? Okay. All right. And so the passage there that David read a while ago, in essence, if you summarize 16 and 17, the work of John would be to do what, if you summarized? Prepare the way for Christ and try to turn the people turn them back to the Lord and make ready the way for the Lord. And then in, let's see, you read through what, David, 17 or 18? 17, okay. 18 through 25 now. Yeah, Patty would be good. Okay, so when the angel tells Zacharias that his wife was going to have a son, he says what? Yeah, how shall I know this? And it's interesting that Mary, now here they are married, but Mary, when basically the angel says the same thing a little bit later on, she says, how's this going to happen since I know not a man that had not had relations with anyone? And so he basically says, well, your kinswoman, she's owned into her pregnancy, and so there's nothing impossible with God. So that would give her, but the reason I point that out is both of them have a question, but with Mary, it was like, this is an impossibility with me because I've never had any relations. So it's virgin birth. And in the case with Elizabeth and Zacharias, well, they were married, but she had been barren and they were old. Well, that's still the case. It still would be considered a miracle, but not in the case with Jesus. Just like with the case with Abraham and Sarah. Barren, old, but they had a Isaac anyway. So there's a question, and his Zacharias' questioning evidently indicated more doubt in his mind. And so as a kind of a punishment for that, he's smitten with what? Muteness. Yeah, he can't speak. Because you believe not my words. That's in verse 20. He tarried in the temple, in the sanctuary part of it. The people marveled. And then when he comes out, they perceived he had seen a vision. And he continued making signs. He was evidently, what we would do, possibly write in the dirt or something. And they understood what happened. He had seen a vision. And so when his time was over, he went to his house. We don't know where that was. His wife, Elizabeth, conceived and hid herself for about 5 months. And then the next part we come to is with Mary and her visit. Let's answer these questions. They're pretty gimme answers. Yes, sir. Uh-huh. Yeah, I think you're right. That's a good point. I need a sign to prove that. Yeah. And the muteness was the sign. Yes. Yeah. So he and all of them understood that. Yes. Yes, exactly right. I was thinking, it's a little bit later on when John is born, word comes goes all the way around. I didn't mark this. Here it is, verse 65. Fear came on all that dwelt around about, and all these sayings were noised abroad throughout all the hill country of Judea. And all that heard them laid them up in their hearts, saying, What then shall this child be? For the hand of the Lord was with him. Now this is at the birth of John. So we have the birth of John. Jesus is just a few months after. And then so you catapult yourself ahead 30 years. And there would be a tremendous number of people who were, witnesses to these things that were happening with Zacharias and Elizabeth. And would have known something, some of them would have known something about Mary and Joseph. And so it was noised abroad. I say that to say this, that they're looking for a Messiah. The pious ones are. They're looking for a deliverer. They're looking for things to happen. And now the silence has been broken. Things are happening. What manner of child is this going to be? Now there's another little span of time where we don't know anything much except the time is getting ready. So we've got people like Simeon and Anna in Luke the 2nd chapter, and who are, they're waiting. They're ready. They're ready for it. They were looking for it. You look like you were going to say something.
I'm just thinking, here's a priest. He should have known all the prophets had said about the one coming.
Yeah.
And the angel here just about quotes what was
Malachi.
that he's going to bring.
Yeah.
He shouldn't have needed to say.
Shouldn't have needed, yeah. You just kind of wonder, did he really know it was an angel? Well, he was fearful, so it was some kind of a divine messenger that he thought was certain.
Can you imagine all this time has transpired, God had not said anything to him, and then your day you go in the temple,
Yeah.
and the angel appeared.
Yeah.
I'd be scared to
Yeah, you would too. It's my special day, It's like most that you read, I was looking at Brother Bowles, H. Leo Bowles' comments on Luke, and this was, what he said was pretty consonant with everybody else. That was almost like a one-time-in-a-lifetime thing when a priest would go in to burn incense, in that because he had so many. And if that's the case, like Charlie said, you would be scared. All right, let's answer take about a minute here. Read verses 5 and 6. What work did Zacharias do? He was a what? priest. What was his wife's name? Yes. How would you describe them spiritually? Yeah, good. Both were righteous before God, walking in all the commandments, ordinances of the Lord, blameless. What were they without? A child, and what two things made it difficult? Barren in age, right. As he was attending to his business as a priest one day, what happened? Angel Gabriel did what? Appeared to him, visited him, and told him about the birth of his son to Elizabeth. The angel stated several things about the one who was to be born to Zacharias and Elizabeth. First, what was he not to do? Not drink any wine or strong drink. Because of the work he would do, how would people look at his birth? Many would what? Rejoice. With what was he to be filled even from birth? The Spirit, right. And I mentioned here the whole phrase likely means that John was to give his whole life as a Nazarite, one who was set apart to serve God in a unique way. Number 6 gives more detail on the vow. There are only 3 men in the Scripture. The Waldrons have a note on this too. These men were Samson, Samuel, and now John. While the Nazarite vow must have been common among them, it was usually brief, not lasting one's whole life. What would be a part of John's work, 16 and 17? We mentioned that a moment ago. That's right. Turn the people back to God. In fact, y'all can all quote John's message summarized by Matthew 3, verse 2. John preached in the wilderness of Judea, saying, repent ye, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Turn. Yeah, that was his message. He was to go before the Lord in the spirit and power of Elijah. We've gone through that. When the angel announced these things to Zacharias, did he immediately believe the angel's words? No. How do you know? What's stated in what verses? That's right, life for a sign, 18 through 20. What sign did, and I think David mentioned this, what sign did the angel give Zacharias to assure him his word would come to pass? Not be able to speak. Let's do the last one and we'll stop. After his shift work ended at the temple, he went back home. Sometime after that, Elizabeth began to expect a baby. Considering their age and the fact that Elizabeth had been barren, it tells us that the birth of John, like Isaac's, was due to a miracle. Okay, we'll have to stop there, and Lord willing, Brother Gene will pick up there Sunday. I'm going to be away for just a brief meeting and be back with you, Lord willing, next Wednesday. So just miss Sunday. Thank you for your help. Hope you're enjoying the study of Jesus.